हॅलो स्टुडंट्स, myself डॉक्टर शेख प्रतिमा, अहमदनगर जिल्हा मराठा विद्याप्रसारक समाजास न्यू आर्ट्स कॉमर्स अँड सायन्स कॉलेज अहमदनगर. Economic Policy of India since 1991. This is the chapter number 9 as per your 11th standard syllabus. In this chapter, we have discussed what is the change about Indian economy and why Indian government will accept the new economic policy. So let's be discussed that the introductory part related to the new economic policy. We know in the beginning of the last decade of the 20th century, Indian economy experienced an the economic crisis. At the end of the June 1991, foreign currency assets the declined to such an the extent that it was the barely enough to the finance 2 week of the imports. We know the annual rate of the inflation reached to the 16.70% in August 1991. This is the main part related to the Indian economy. Since independence, India has followed the policy of socialistic pattern of the society based on the equality. We know this, so the government had put many controls and the regulations on each and every economic activity. Therefore, the period 1950 to 80 was known as the license Raj. But slowly, the good effects of this policy started disappearing, and the problems of stagnation, inflation, then frustration, then imbalance, etc., started increasing. So, the government expenditure was the greater than its revenue due to the defense expenditure, then subsidies, then interest on loans, etc. We know the it will be act as a facilitator, then the coordinator, then the inspirer, and the supervisor. That is the main role played by the Indian government. This had to hampered the rate of growth of the output and the employment. Therefore, the urgent need was felt to free the economy from unwanted controls and the restrictions. This leads to the introduction of the economic reforms since 1991. The process of the new economic policy, which started in 1985, got a momentum in 1991. The new industrial policy introduced the radical the changes to the unshackle India's industrial economy from the cobweb of the necessarily the bureaucratic the controls and the rigidity in the government the procedure. According to the new industrial policy, the state will no longer play the role of controller and the regulator, but it will act a facilitator, then the coordinator, then inspirer, and also the supervisor. There is the role about the government. So let's we discuss the next point related to this chapter, like the objectives of the economic policy of 1991. We know the first objective is to plug the Indian economy into the arena of the globalization. Why the globalization is important to the Indian economy? Because we global our economy. Then to bring down the rate of inflation. See, inflation means what? The normal commodities, the common and the simple commodities price continuously rises. That is called as the inflation. To correct the disequilibrium in the balance of payments. Then the next objective is like the to acquire the high economic growth rate, to build the sufficient foreign exchange reserves. Why the foreign exchange reserves is most important? Because we know that reserves will increase your the foreign trade, to achieve the economic stabilization and to reduce the fiscal deficit, to the establish the international trade relations, to free flow of the goods without any restrictions. Then the last point is related to this objective is like to increase the participation of the private sector. See, these are the main objectives of the economic policy. We know the economic reforms aims at the market driven program. In India, economic reforms have been the implemented under the guiding the philosophy of structural the adjustment and the stabilization policy of the World Bank and the IMF. The real efforts were made by the late Prime Minister Sri Rajiv Gandhi in the 1985 to reform the Indian economy. But the credit goes to the late Prime Minister Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao and also the Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, who introduced the new economic policy in 1991. So let's we discuss the next point related to this chapter, like the features of the economic policy of 1991. And the first feature is like the delicensing. We know the before 1991 there was a governmental license raj, means new economic policy started the abolishing the industrial licensing for all industries. They accept the 18 industries of the social security concern. Now there are only the 6 industry under the compulsory licensing. So all industries except 18 specific industries of the the importance required the license as per the Department of Industrial Policy and also the Promotion Government of India. Only for following 4 industries required the compulsory licensing, like the electronic, the aerospace and the defense equipment. Then the second is the industrial, the explosive. Then the third is the hazardous, the chemicals, then drugs and also the pharmaceuticals, and last is the cigarettes. So the other the industries they are open, and the 85% industries are now delicensed. It means they do not need the government approval to set up new projects for the expanding the existing projects. Then the second point is the abolition of the monopolized and the restrictive trade practices act, like the MRTP act. According to this the MRTP act, we know it was the compulsory for the large industrial houses to take the approval of the central government for the establishment, then the expansion, then the merger, etc. According to the MRTP act, means like the monopolized and the restrictive the trade practices act. This resulted in the slow growth of industries. Abolition of the MRTP acts has encouraged the industrial growth. So this result is in slow industrial growth. So that's why the government will abolish to the MRTP act and has the encourage the industrial growth. Then the next feature is like the encouragement to smart sector, otherwise the small sector. We know the why I have discussed that the small sector, because smart sector, because we know the each and every governmental sector, otherwise the industrial sector, service sector and the agricultural sector, these all are the smart sector. The government encouraged the small sector units to attain a higher growth rate in the output, the employment and also the export sector. We know the small sector plays the main role of our economy. So the investment limit in the small scale industries has been raised from the 1 crore to 5 crore to motivate the competitiveness and also the technology upgradation. So this is the most important. Then next feature is the encouraging the foreign investment, that is called as the FDI. The for short form is like the FDI. This is the part of industrial policy. FDI is the part of industrial policy. So that's why the government will always support to encourage the FDI, the foreign direct investment. So that investment will the increase your the job opportunities, otherwise the employment. The industrial policy of 1991 they approved the foreign direct investment to promote the foreign investment in high priority industries requiring the high investment and technology. In the beginning, the FDI was the permitted up to the 51%. Then this limit was raised to 74%. And after few years, it's also the 100% for many industries. So this is the effect of the FDI. Then let's we discuss the reduce role of the public sector. We know this new economic policy will support for the privatization. So the many changes were made in the public sector policy to include the following some the objectives, like the ending the state monopoly, then the improving the efficiency of the public sector, then releasing the capital blocked in the sick the public sector enterprises. Because we know the our population increase, so that's why the government expenditure is increased. So the renovation, otherwise the reformation, is not possible to the governmental industries. So that's why they reduce to the role of the public sector to encourage the private sector. So new economic policy reduces the number of industries in the public sector from the 17 to 8 from 2014. So there are only the two industries reserved for public sector, which include the railways and also the atomic energy. Then other is the open for the private investment. So this significantly the changes were the brought about to the public sector with the objective of the ending the state monopoly, improving the efficiency of the public sector, then releasing the capital blocked in the sick public sector industries. So this is the main role about the governmental sector. Then next point is like the trade liberalization. We know the liberalization means the abolish the license raj and accept the liberal policy related to the different sector. So the liberalization, trade liberalization means it support the import, the licensing controls have been the abolished. Almost the all capital goods, the raw materials, then intermediate goods and other components were made freely importable. It's established the exporters are allowed to raise the external credit of the finance their trade. So the special economic zones will are also the set up to the promote the exports, otherwise the exporting goods. So the Indian government will always support to the sales, and the government has also the introduced the concept of the agro export zones like the AEZ. These agro export zones is related to the agricultural product to encourage the agricultural exports. The next point is the reforms in the insurance sector. We know the at present the private the companies will also release the insurance sector, otherwise opened the insurance sector. So the insurance sector was the monopoly of the government. This policy which passed the insurance regularly, and the Development Authority Act like the IRDA is in 1991 to introduce the reforms in the sector. The IRDA has given the license to many private companies to enter the insurance business. So this has ended the monopoly of the government in this sector. The next feature is like the reforms in the financial sector. Earlier, the only cooperative banks and the public sector banks were the permitted to do the banking business in the financial sector. But this the new economic policy has also permitted to the entry of the new private banks and the foreign banks. We know the international banks will create the competition for the Indian banks. That is the most important part. So the reforms of the financial sector, this is the main feature of the new economic reforms. We know the finance is the most important point, but the current account, the convertibility and also the export promotion, this is the support for that the new industrial policy and also the industrial section. So these are the features of the new economic policy of the 1991. So let's we discuss the next point related to this chapter like the components of the new economic policy. We know the Indian economy was integrated with the world economy through the new economic policy in 1991. The Indian government will accept that the new economic reforms. It gave a new direction. New economic policy has the three important components like the liberalization, then second is the privatization, and third one is like the globalization. Therefore, the new economic policy is called as the LPG policy, otherwise the LPG package. And this is the short form about the liberalization, privatization, and globalization. These three components are not the independent, but they are interdependent. So that's why the each and every component is most important. Therefore, the effectiveness of the new economic policy depends upon them. So it's necessary to understand these three components in details. So students, in the next video, we have discussed in detail in the components of the new economic policy. Okay. So I think you have to understood that the introductory part and the features of the new economic policy since 1991. Okay. So goodbye everybody.